Master John Madden Juanito at the athletic field at the edge of the Acoma Pueblo. There's a basketball court. It doesn't seem to have hoops at this point. And also a soccer field on concrete. They play soccer out there on dirt, and there's a baseball diamond out there. It's at the south edge of the Acoma Pueblo, and it's where I come when I really need to clear my head and have quiet. And I want to tell a story about emotions and our human fear of our own emotions and our societal fear of emotions, especially as manifested by the psychiatry industry, which tries to drug people out of their emotions. My take as a clinical psychologist and as a survivor of the psychiatry system. I grew up in the 50s and 60s in the U.S., Irish Catholic family, which the Irish were not great at dealing with feelings. Either coast in the U.S. was big time into therapy already at that point. The Freudian revolution had hit full steam, and people were developing an awareness of you had to talk about your feelings. That was not true of my working class Irish family. When I, as the first generation to go off to college and studied psychology as an undergrad and then went to grad school for clinical psychology. But when I was an undergrad and would come home and say to my mom something that was psychologically aware or that tried to talk about my development as a person, her classic line was, "John, there's such a thing as too much psychology." And that's really what she believed. It was very much the era for that way of looking at things. When I went to grad school at the University of Rochester, which was then rated either number 1 or 2 for clinical psychology in the country, I had never visited there. I did a telephone interview with one of 2 very creative and interesting junior faculty, neither of whom lasted longer than a year when I got there. They were forced out. But I had the notion, I had taken a year off and worked in a mental health center. And what I saw there, my original plan was to be a psychiatrist. And what I saw in the mental health center was the psychiatrists were pushing pills and the psychologists were dealing with psychology. Guess what? So I said, okay, let's be a clinical psychologist. And I had the mistaken illusion that a PhD program in clinical psychology would be wonderful, deep people like the psychologists I saw in the field, and it would just be wonderful. In fact, our faculty were competitive, aggressive academics looking to move their careers ahead, who dabbled in doing psychotherapy, but really were not any good at it. And the 2 younger faculty who were doing all kinds of creative therapies left either somewhere in first or second year I was there out of 4. Us students, we were student radicals. Mine was the second class that had some student radicals. Ken Cohen from the class ahead of me was there straight from the free speech movement at Berkeley. He was a genuine hippie and a really brilliant guy who kind of was, in many ways, the thought leader of us, people who were fighting the system. Because what they were offering us as psychotherapy models were either psychoanalysis, which more and more I reclaimed a lot of what Freud said, but not the whole psychoanalytic way of going at relating to people, or behaviorism, manipulating people. So we didn't like those. And the alternatives that we had available to us were Carl Rogers, client-centered therapy. Yes, I'm listening. Bring it forward. Total support. Or Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapy, which was much more confrontive. And Fritz was famous for saying, bullshit. That's bullshit. Say something that's real. And I've used that line myself in the last few years. So I use them both. I was attempting to be happily married in a terrible marriage. instead of after I graduated, I was going to go to Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco and be a true hippie. But instead, I stayed in Chicago and married a woman very much like my mother. And it was pretty much a terrible marriage, but we tried. We sure tried. When we got to Rochester, I had two dreams that confronted me with what was going on in my emotions. Classic Freud, sex and aggression. Sex and aggression is where we're hung up. So the sexual dream, Madeline in my class was, what an amazing woman she was. Sweet, bright, funny. Several of us had big crushes on her. And my crush for her manifested in a dream where I was having incredible sex with Madeline, and I woke up freaked because I was trying to be a good monogamous husband, which I've never been cut out for monogamy, and I'm more and more realizing some people just ain't. It's not the right path for a lot of people. I was freaked out by that. And the aggression was Mel Zaks was the head of the program, and he was kind of cutthroat, really ambitious guy. The line that offended us most, he would say this often, well, I don't see where that buys you anything. We're going, buy? Are we buying and selling now? Is this a commercial thing? We were pretty green and innocent. But I had a dream about Mel where I machine gunned him at close range, blood and guts everywhere, and that freaked me out at least as much as the sexual dream. So I got involved in reevaluation co-counseling as opposed to therapy, and it was wonderful. Harvey Jackins, Wikipedia those, reevaluation counseling, I'll include links. Harvey Jackins, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I ended up with a 25-year involvement in that, 15 of it very formal, where my wife and I both became teachers. When we moved to different places, we set up co-counseling communities. We threw ourselves into it. We went away to workshops with Harvey, and Harvey would come to Rochester a couple times a year to do a workshop there. So the first time I really let it rip with my anger in a co-counseling session with a peer, pounding on pillows, I realized into it that my fear was that if I unleashed that raging demon, it would never go back in the bottle. And the amazing discovery was that after 40 minutes or whatever of pounding and yelling, I didn't feel angry anymore. It wasn't bottomless. That was amazing. That was amazing to learn that I could face it, I could be with it, I could express it, and nothing awful happened. So I'm going to fast forward. I had a very illustrious career as a psychologist, followed by 15 years as a management consultant, 4 years with AT&T at the height of its glory, and AT&T really knew how to do career development and the development of people. And so my field of organization development, it was so exciting, so exciting. And I was in Chicago, my home, which really supports me as a person. It's a great town for me. I took a job in Cincinnati, really buttoned downtown. While I was there, GQ magazine had a cover story, Cincinnati, America's most uptight city, which it was. And I was working at the power company, which was a very conservative company. One very enlightened vice president wanted to have us kind of consultants work there, even though the rest of the company had no idea what to do with us. I went there to be closer to my son, who was living in Louisville. And my sex abuse memories came out in a series of dreams that I fought ferociously. I tried so hard not to remember, but it finally, over a period of months, overwhelmed me. And I got blown out. I no longer, even after all the co-counseling I had done, all the stuff, working on, surfacing stuff, get it out, to see that there was this incredible mother lode of trauma that I never even knew was there, really scared the crap out of me. I became afraid of my own feelings. And Stanislav Grof is a transpersonal psychologist who says that could be the good time for you. If you get the guidance of a genuine spiritual teacher who can say to you, good, let's get at who you really are. And I got fired from my job there in a very crazy, wrongful way. Career isn't really what it's all about, and family isn't even what it's really all about. The spiritual work is to find out who you really are. And this is a chance to roll up your sleeves and do that. If I had found a spiritual teacher like that, it could have gone well. But what Grof says is that in our society, where there mostly aren't genuine spiritual teachers, the priests and ministers, no, they're about 10 commandments. They're not about the real deep spiritual work. So you get taken to the doctors who take you to the psychiatrist, and psychiatrists will medicate you because that's the only thing they know how to do. And that's what they did. Made it hard for me to feel my feelings. Something like 15 years into the 30 years that I was lost in that psychiatric wilderness, I asked a really wonderful psychiatrist who unfortunately never thought to challenge my diagnosis. I said, my friend Tony says the reason I can't cry anymore, which through co-counseling had become a wonderful healing vehicle for me, is the meds. What do you think? He said, yeah. Those mood stabilizers we have you on, they knock off the highs so you don't go too high, which going high was never really a problem for me, but the psychiatrist thought so. Before I got in their clutches, I never got depressed afterwards. I just get tired, but I learned from them to hate myself, and my energy was so thrown off by the drugs that I got psychiatrically depressed. So, so Dave Manley says to me, knocks off the highs. It will keep you from going so low, so there's less chance of you committing suicide, which was walked with me for 30 years, was the possibility of suicide in one big sincere attempt. So, and everything in the middle gets kind of blurry. Sorry. He didn't say. What it means is you don't get to be human. You don't get to be fully human. You don't get to feel fully alive. And maybe you'll say that it's worth it so I don't commit suicide. And I took that bargain for another 7 years. I'm coughing. We're at 13 minutes. I think that's enough for this one. What I've learned over the last 5 years, and really the whole 30 years that I was under the table psychiatrically, I kept working, kept doing every kind of personal growth, every kind of spiritual growth, did my work. 5 years ago, I got shot out of a cannon. Life, God, Spirit said, you've suffered long enough. You've learned what you need to learn from that. Now go play. So I'm never depressed, never anything close to depressed. I love life. I love myself. Love Mexico. I'm crazy about Mexico and crazy about Akumal. But last night in my little apartment, which is lovely, it's just been remodeled, and it's a very safe place for me. In the middle of the night, I got scared. And when I worked with it, my son's birthday is tomorrow. My son, who adored me to age 20, has now adopted his mom's position that when I left the family, when I got the divorce, which I had to, I ruined their lives. And he hasn't talked to me for 2.5 years. And his stance is, you'll never hear from me again. You'll never see your grandkids again. So I've grieved and grieved and grieved. That was brewing over a whole lot of years. And then the last few years, it's been out on the surface. Grieve. Usually it's not on top of me. I go days without worrying about it. But his birthday and Christmas coming up, So I realized, okay, that's why you feel terrible. That's why you're getting scared of yourself, because that grief is bubbling up again. So I got up in the middle of the night and cried for about an hour. And I've been peaceful again ever since. Because I've learned I don't have to fear my emotions. I can work with them. I'm like a super griever. I'm never genuinely sad, pretty much. But I grieve over the state of the U.S. I grieved over George Floyd. Yeah. grieving is healthy. Grieving is super healthy. It's what you need to do. We need, Michael Franti says, we're all here to heal life's trauma. The psychiatrists do not understand that. Mostly our society doesn't understand that. But I do. I do, and I'm having the best life I could possibly imagine, beyond my wildest dreams. Beyond my wildest dreams.